questions on sort of, I guess, cultural relativism kind of stuff. So the issue of slavery came up twice, and then the patriarchal society of Saudi Arabia. So to sort of bridge those three issues together, since they seem related, you both talk about morality as if it is a universal constant. However, isn't morality culturally specific? Example, slavery was perfectly acceptable in many cultures, and the slave owners were moral from their perspective. And let's see. Oh, and slavery was a benefit to the society as a whole, which made us economically independent, maybe? Independent? I don't know. And then as as another example that maybe one of you might want to address, like the patriarchal society of Saudi Arabia seems to be a counterexample to your analysis, specifically Dr. Carrier. Isn't a society in which the immoral treatment of women isn't punished? Isn't that a society in which the immoral treatment of women isn't punished? Maybe that is kind of a question, but we'll stick with the slavery thing.
Okay. For whom? Okay. I'm not sure I understood the question exactly. So, in some societies, slavery might be acceptable. So that's basically the line of thought here.
There's an overall benefit to slavery, economic benefit.
Yeah. Well, the economic benefits of slavery and so forth aren't really relevant to what either of us are talking about. We're talking about let's talk about the slave owners, basically. The argument would be, the question would be, why would the slave owners want to give up slavery, for example? And I actually do address this in some interesting analytical detail in a book that's coming out this July called The End of Christianity. It's the sequel to The Christian Delusion. Now, The Christian Delusion is an awesome book. The End of Christianity is even more awesome. And I don't say that because I'm in it. I am in it. But there's many authors. It's many chapters. And it's really good. But in this one, I have a paper defending this theory in which it was peer-reviewed by several professors of philosophy. So it's actually much more sophisticated than all my previous work. So if you want to see the ultimate, peer-reviewed philosophical and analytical defense of my view, that's the thing to do. And I use this example in there. I can't cover every single issue that I bring up in there, but some of them are, for example, the game theory aspect of it. A slave owner has to accept the fact, if he's rational, a slave owner has to accept the fact that his slaves ought to kill him. Not that people believe they have to kill him, but he would actually rationally agree that the correct thing for slaves to do would be to kill him. So essentially he has to live with this cognitive dissonance, knowing that he's in a system where there are people who have legitimate reason to kill him. And that, once you realize that, once you come to that realization, it's going to be a lot harder to live with yourself as a slave owner. Otherwise, you can do it by concealing these facts from yourself, by deluding yourself and living outside the world of facts. But neither of us would agree that that's going to work out best for people in the long run. Another reason is to be a slave owner, you have to be basically you have to cultivate a certain degree of lack of compassion. You have to not have this compassion for these fellow human beings. So for one thing, you're actually cutting yourself off from a source of satisfaction and happiness. But another thing, that cruelty is going to leak over into other aspects of your life. And that's going to have net effects on you. And the social system you have to support as a slave owner is actually going to reciprocate against you in ways that a society that's more free will actually be better off for the slave owners in terms of their actual satisfaction. It might not be better off economically, but money isn't the purpose of life. I mean, you can gain satisfaction in life without having fabulous wealth or whatever the case is. The error is in thinking that the slave owner is giving up something important by giving up his wealth, by giving up his slaves, when in reality he would gain so much more from doing it. And one of the examples of this is not slavery per se, but the Schindler's List, the movie, actually portrays this moral development of someone realizing this. It's not in the context of slavery, but you can see the parallel, how someone could have come to that same realization, and in fact there were some slave owners who did. So that's how I would address that question. And I don't know if it would be terribly different.
Yeah, I mean, there would definitely be some differences. I think overall, there are good reasons why.
I had that problem too. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's actually really sensitive, so you can keep it far.
Okay. As I explained in my opening statement, I think there are a lot of reasons why slavery tends to thwart a whole lot of different desires. The slaves want to be free, be able to make their own decisions, not be imposed upon, etc., etc. I think it is a little bit more complicated to ask whether it is good for the slave holders. I think that could be a whole other debate. I do think, I'm not quite convinced by all of Dr. Carrier's arguments on that point, though. For example, he says that if you were a slave owner and rational, you would have to recognize that your opponent, I'm sorry.
No, you wouldn't.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to finish.
He's kidding.
If you're a rational slave owner, Dr. Carrier said that you would have to recognize that the slave has a reason to kill you. Maybe that's true, but you could say the same thing about a soldier in war who might realize that rationally the person on the other side has a reason to kill him. That doesn't mean that the soldier can't live with himself just based on knowing that. Now, to address the other point raised in the question, whether it's cultural relativism, it isn't morality culturally specific. Belief about morality is culturally specific. We believe different things about morality than people in Saudi Arabia, but that doesn't change the facts of the world. And no matter where you are and what you believe, certain things thwart desires, and certain things fulfill desires.
Yeah, I'll just address what I meant by the game theoretic aspect of it. He gives the analogy of a soldier in war might have a reason to kill you. I'm not talking about having a reason to kill you. I'm talking about having a reason to kill you and being in the right. If you were in a war situation and you knew the soldiers were perfectly in the right, and which would mean, of course, that you were in the wrong, that would be a lot harder for you to live with yourself in that respect. You have to actually convince yourself that you're in the right and they're in the wrong. But most people can only do that by lying to themselves, by deceiving themselves. That's what propaganda is about. That's why you have to deceive soldiers into going into battle sometimes, by making them think that they're in the right, when in reality they're not. But when we're talking about what the facts actually are, apart from the lies and the deceptions and the delusions, if you were in a war situation and you realized that your enemy was in the right, you probably would give up fighting. And that's the reality of it. And that's what I'm talking about. A slave owner would have to realize that his slaves would be perfectly in the right to kill him. And it would be a lot harder for me to live as a slave owner knowing that. I would much rather free the slaves and start taking them on as hired laborers and treating them like human beings, because I would be able to live with myself much more easily that way. It would be more satisfying to live that way. And I would get much more out of it. The slaves would be much more protective of me. They would be, we would have much more human cooperation, and we would share much more joys and experiences together. That human society on our, let's say, plantation or whatever, would be so much more pleasant to live on than the sort of brutal reality of a slave plantation. So a slave master would actually be able to get things out of freeing his slaves that he would never be able to gain from being a slave master. And those are the points that I'm trying to make on this issue.
Dr. Carrier mentions the case of a soldier who recognizing that he's not in the right and wanting to give up fighting. I think in general, war is pretty murky. It's not like there's one side that's completely in the right and one side that's completely in the wrong. Both sides might have, both governments might have done some immoral things and some good things. And I think it's possible to have a soldier on one side who's rationally justified to fight to defend his country and his family, and a soldier on the other side who is also justified to fight to defend his family.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think that situation would ever actually exist.
Move on to other easy topics like abortion.